Hi guys, it's Dave from Wing Chun Mind Force. I love Kung Fu, just telling you. The classic Kung Fu Panda saying. I've been practicing what I think of as Kung Fu for 50 years. It's 1976 when I started with my first teacher, a guy called Tony Aston, and to be honest, it wasn't really Kung Fu. It was kickboxing, it was MMA. He was a really, really bloody good third dan Jun Rhee student, Taekwondo, and his kicks were like lightning, and he was a tough boy. He was about 27, and I met him because we had a famous guy come up from Sydney, a guy called Lawrence Lee, who'd been in a couple of amazing Kung Fu demos. And if you were there at the time in the 70s, you know what the feeling was. You younger people don't really know just how exciting Kung Fu was to us, and why people like me get really offended when people say Wing Chun and Kung Fu's weak and crap. I just really make my blood boil. But we knew back then how cool it was, because Bruce Lee sort of started the great craze, and then there was the Kung Fu TV series, which was hugely popular. And as much as, the guy, David Carradine, couldn't do Kung Fu at all, but it was such a beautifully made thing, and there was lots of wonderful Kung Fu wisdom in it, and that turned me on as well. But Lawrence Lee did an amazing demo, and it was something out of one of those old Kung Fu movies. Probably about 100 people turned up at this leagues club in Brisbane called the South League Club. And I think it's still there, the original place. And he talked about what Kung Fu was like. And then he was going to do a demo, and there was these tough young guys up the back who might have been Bob Jones guys or one of those full contact groups. And they were sort of loudly, interrupting, making noise, and started sniggering when he was talking about how he's going to do a demo. So he said, "Oh, you fellas up the back, you look like martial artists. Why don't you come down and help me do this demo?" And they swaggered down. It was just straight out of a movie. And he gave this one guy a big, solid pad about this thick. It was like foam, just white foam. And then he put his mates behind him, and he said, stand back a bit just to catch him. And they're laughing like as if you're going to, toss our mate very far with your pathetic Kung Fu. And Lawrence was standing really close to this guy. Like, he wasn't getting back and having a run up. He was literally standing like the guy was just there. And Lawrence is talking to us, and he looks at the guy. He says, "You ready?" He says, "Kung Fu kicks and punches are very powerful, but they're very fast, and they're effective at short range." And he goes, "Kapow," and just side kicks this guy. And literally the guy went flying, knocked over both of his mates. They got up pretty chastened, like, oh God. And later I went and picked up this piece of foam, and Lawrence had the coolest shoes, the Adidas Rome. They were white with 3 blue stripes on them. I'm talking 1976. We didn't have much in the way of sneakers back then. So these were the coolest. And the tread was deeply embedded into this thing. Like, he hit it just perfectly. So I was hooked, and then he was going to be coming up regularly and training us, but he couldn't come. There wasn't enough people showed interest. He was going to fly up, which was expensive back then. So this guy who organised it, who'd actually come around to my house, which I was impressed with, there was in the newspaper, it said, "You want to learn Kung Fu, ring this number." And I had a picture of Bruce Lee, I guess. My dad was only a youngish guy then. I think he was about 35. And he was excited about it. He went, "Wow, we're going to do this, Dave. We're going to make sure you learn Kung Fu." So this guy, Tony Aston, turned up, and he didn't look like a martial artist, typical beginner's mistake, but he's a bit of a character. He had a slight speech impediment, you might say, just slight. But he was a really likable guy, and he said, come along to Mr. Lee's workshop. And then when he rang me and said, sorry, it's not going to happen, but if you're interested in learning Kung Fu, I'm going to start something and teach here. So I was just in. So Dad and I turned up, and I remember when I started, there was about 30 dudes turned up, and as often happens, it whittled down pretty quick to about, 8 of us who are hardcore. There was a number of Taekwondo guys who were really like Tony. And we used to just do heaps and heaps and heaps of sweating and training and knuckle push-ups and running and all that super fit stuff. And we also used to just bare knuckle, full contact fight each other. We wouldn't hit in the face, but supposedly it was light contact, but being young guys, we just hammer each other. And I did that for a couple of years, and it sort of turned me into a pretty confident street bluer, because I knew I could cop it. And Tony gave me lots of, pretty useful stuff. Like, really, he highly regarded Western boxing, and he used to take me along to Bruce Lee movies, or we'd go together to the cinemas, and we'd also go to the drive-in because we didn't have video back then. So the only way to see Bruce's movies was to actually go to a cinema. So we would sit there in the car at the drive-in, not exactly taking notes, but mentally just watching Bruce. Here it comes, let's see if we can work out what he does here. So I was sort of learning some Wing Chun type ideas through watching Bruce and getting Tony's more experienced martial arts concept. So I practiced with him for 2 years. There's lots of stories I could tell, but I won't tell it here. But he eventually moved away, and for years I didn't really have any training, but I used to keep practicing the stuff he taught me, and I used to keep doing my knuckle push-ups and being super fit. And then in the 80s, I got involved with Goju-Ryu, a really good Okinawan style, with this pretty hardcore dude in Newcastle. I almost remembered his name then. He was a real nugget of a guy. He had bald head like me, very solid boy. And I remember he used to wear these Cuban heel boots, and he was a sort of a shortish guy, I think, but I said to him, what's the go with your boots, He says, oh, they're great fighting boots, mate. He says, solid leather boots with a good heel. It's a weapon. And I sort of remember that. And then that was 1988, and it wasn't until 1997 that I finally found a Wing Chun school, and that was Sifu Gym School, the International Wing Chun Academy. It was actually my girlfriend at the time who, when I was at art school, she said to me, oh, I'm learning Kung Fu. And I went, really? What are you learning? She says, it's called Wing Chun. I went, oh, yeah. And I'd already been to a Wing Chun school close by, and I think it was a William Chung school, and I liked them and it looked really cool, and I was ready to join up with them. And then my friend Erina, her name was, she told me about this other school and this Sifu Gym, so I started training with Sifu Gym, and I've never looked back. And there's a lot of stories to be told, and I've told a lot of them about my, what is it now? I was 97, so it's 29 years. I just had a fantastic training this morning. Like 29 years later, I'm loving Wing Chun. And actually, something happened this morning in my training that I'm going to share with you in the next video. And I haven't forgotten about making a video about all the street stuff I learned as a cop, and, military, my paramilitary experience as a Royal Australian Air Force cadet in the Vietnam War era. I learned a lot of cool things from Charlie, don't you know? And yeah, I'll be doing that, absolutely. But I just wanted to say, stay in love with Kung Fu. Don't let any ninny talk you into this idea that Chinese Kung Fu is not powerful. Like, go and watch Fist of Fury again. If you start thinking like that, go and watch Fist of Fury. Listen to what Bruce has to say to the Japanese dojo. Because it's the same thing. That stuff was going on in the 30s. It was going on in the 70s. Bagging the Chinese, bagging, Chinese arts. I love Japan. I'm really great respect for Japan and Budo and all the arts of Japan. But I'm telling you, Chinese are not sick men. All right? And I love Kung Fu. I think I told you that. See you again.